Hey y'all, some of you might have noticed in my last video that my filming setup's a little different right now. My husband and I just moved into a new house and it's a mess in here right now, to say the least. For today's video, I thought it would be a lot of fun to read books set in Alaska, since that is where I'm currently living. Mix of books here for you guys, but I had a lot of fun doing this video. So the first book I read was Crave by Tracy Wolff. Very Twilight-esque, or like the Vampire Diaries was another vibe I got from this. It is a YA paranormal romance book. It's about a girl named Grace who loses both of her parents and she ends up having to move to this elite boarding school in Denali, Alaska, because her uncle runs this boarding school. But what she doesn't know is all the students there are supernatural creatures, and so right off the bat she has a really hard time fitting in. But then she meets Jackson, who's like the resident bad boy, and he's hiding this dangerous secret. I read this book so long ago, I think it was sometime last year, but I have a bunch of notes on it. This is what I said about this book. Her writing felt a lot like how a parent would mimic like how a teen would act. Like, it's accurate, but it doesn't feel very genuine. I think that's a big reason that I wasn't absolutely in love with this book, but I couldn't not finish it. I mean, who doesn't love a brooding, sexy vampire story? One thing I really loved about this book is all of the chapter names were like funny or clever things. Like my favorite one, I like standing on my own 2 feet, but getting swept off them feels surprisingly good too. Or things that Harry Styles and Hot Pink have in common. I don't know. I just thought they were really funny. That was probably like my favorite part about this book. It is a series, though. I haven't read the other ones. Don't know if I will. And I remember she did a pretty good job of tying in like how cold Alaska is, or like how it's always bright or always dark depending on the time of year. Okay, moving on. The next thing I read was The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. And you guys, I loved this book. It was so good. Totally different from the vibe of the last one. This one is about a girl named Kala who used to live in Alaska with her mom and dad, who end up splitting up, and her mom moved to Canada, and her dad don't really keep in touch. Her dad owns like a mini airport, like charter planes, and he's super busy, doesn't like to leave Alaska. But Kala finds out that he's very sick, so she decides to go and visit him. She wants the chance to kind of fix her relationship with her father before it's too late. As per the story of my life and what happens every single time I film a video, my camera died, so I have no idea where I left off. So everyone in this small little Alaskan town loves Kala's father, and Kala ends up getting a lot of heat. I really hope I'm pronouncing her name right. She ends up getting a lot of heat, especially from Jonah, who works for her dad, because her and her father didn't keep in touch, which really actually annoyed me, because they left Alaska when she was a baby, and she tried to keep in touch with her dad, and he kind of cut ties with them. So it's not really the child's responsibility to keep in touch with her parent anyway. That's the adult's job, not the kid's job. Her dad himself does take the blame for that, which is who should take the blame, honestly. Her parents, not her. He seems like a total grump, but he's actually really sweet, and he's a big bear and everyone loves him. This is like my favorite trope, which is enemies to lovers. And I just wish so badly that they would make this into a movie because I need to see it in person. I can't remember exactly where this book was set. I know it was outside of Anchorage. I believe kind of the area that I'm in, but way more wild. And I actually don't think it was a real place. I think it's just based off of a place here in Alaska. I did love all the characters in the book and the different things that they brought out of each other. I can also understand the like loneliness behind the long winters and living in a tiny town. Again, theirs was definitely like less developed than the town I live in. I could not do anything that didn't have an actual grocery store in it or a place where your only option is an outhouse. Like, no thank you. I also learned about the fact that Alaska has dry towns, which a dry town or a dry village is where some places in Alaska they've banned both the sale and possession of alcohol. I heard part of it had to do with the fact that alcohol was such a big issue and people would pass out and die outside because it was so cold. Please don't quote me on that. I just tried Googling it but could not find any factual information. So there's definitely a lot of stuff in this book that I related to as far as how tough it can be to live in Alaska. I wonder if I'm being the selfish one. If I should grit my teeth and bear the misery, the isolation of Alaska. After all, I made the bed I'm running from now. When I admitted that I've cried at least once a day for the past year, especially during the painfully long, cold, dark winter when daylight is scarce, that I hate living in the last American frontier, that I crave being close to my family and friends and the urban bustle of my childhood in my own country. It does very much feel like you're in a different country out here sometimes. Honestly, I thought this book was so beautiful. The whole relationship between Calla and her father, and then this progression with Ren and the decisions they have to make as far as Calla doesn't want to live in Alaska, but this is Jonah's home and she's kind of going down the same pathway and having the same issues that her mom and dad also had to face and deal with. Things that had affected her life. So I believe there's 2 more books after this. I haven't read them yet, but I need to. Definitely made me cry a little bit at the end. Okay, I'm so embarrassed to say this, but the next book I read was The Tourist Attraction by Sarah Morgenthaler. Probably pronouncing that wrong. I did not finish this book. I, for some reason, just could not get behind it. And my husband's like, you know, you don't have to actually finish the book, right? I even went to the last chapter and tried to just read the last chapter to see like what the conclusion was, and I couldn't even get through the last chapter. There's only one other book I have DNF'd and I plan on reading it one day, but I don't know if I'll ever go back to this one. If any of you have read it and you like absolutely loved it, please let me know and maybe I'll try and finish it. I think based off of my dog earring, I've made it to chapter 8, which is not that far into the book. That actually looks like almost halfway, but anyway. This is like a rom-com book. This is about a guy named Graham who's a grumpy guy. He meets a tourist named Zoe at his restaurant called Tourist Trap, and he immediately is like infatuated with her and is very like sweet and lovey to her, which I actually really like that. I think it's so cute when they're like grumpy with everyone else but really nice and sweet and protective with the girl they're into. This book is set in a fake place in Alaska called Moose Springs, which just feels like if someone was like coming up with a fake town in Alaska, that is the name they would use. It also felt like this was written from someone who hasn't actually been to Alaska. I don't know, I just really couldn't get behind it, and I don't really know what the conflict ends up being or anything like that because I didn't read far enough into it. I did try to picture, if you've ever watched Heart of Dixie, I tried to picture Zoe in the book to Zoe Hart and Graham as Wade. That helped a little bit, but like I said, I didn't make it very far into this book. So the last book I read was by Kristen Hanna. It's called The Great Alone. This one is like a historical fiction book. This was set in 1974, which was a lot of fun. It's about this girl named Lenny who has a dad that was in the Vietnam War. And he came home with some PTSD and didn't have the tools to handle it. And he was gifted some land from one of his war buddies that passed away. And it happens to be in the middle of nowhere in Alaska. So he takes his daughter Lenny and his wife Cora out there to be Alaskans in the wild. So it's set in Knik, located near Homer, Alaska, but I believe Knik is not a real place. Anyway, it's totally off the grid, so no running water, no heat or electricity, only outhouses. Like, it's true wild Alaska. You have to hunt for your food. It's just a really, really tough way of living, especially I would imagine in the 70s. It would be so much harder. I had a really tough time with her parents because her father clearly needed help, and instead of getting it, he took it out on his wife. And I wanted his wife to take Lenny and run away so bad. Anyway, there aren't many kids in this town that Lenny lives in, but she ends up going to school with a boy about her age, Matthew, and they become really, really close friends. And it's like her coming of age story. It's her growing up in the Alaskan wilderness and how she handles these really big issues with her father from a young age. And let me tell you, this book had me ugly crying, like full on hysterical. My mom had read it before me and she's like, this book has such a good ending. And I was maybe about like 5 chapters to the end, and my husband came in and I was starting to cry and he's like, what's wrong? And I was like, my mom lied to me. This is a terrible book. But I promise you, if you just stick it out to the end, it gets better than you think it will. I had zero confidence that there'd be any sort of happy ending, but I was surprised, I'll say that. One of the quotes I loved from this book was talking about people that come to Alaska. They can't wait to get back to the land of drive-in theaters and heat that comes on at the flip of a switch, and sunlight. I agree with that so much. That is me. I mean, we do have heat that comes on at the flip of a switch, but I miss the constant sunshine and I miss drive-in theaters. I love the drive-in theater. I know that's not really like a big deal anywhere anymore. If you still go to a drive-in theater, let me know, because I just think they're so much fun. I think we need to bring them back. And one of my favorite quotes was, his smile was like the gravitational pull from one of her science fiction novels. She moved toward him. I think I've realized from reading the last 2 Kristen Hanna books, I don't think I love how she does dialogue. I love her stories and her storytelling, but the dialogue itself seems kind of like weird and like not a normal flow of conversation, and there's not much of it. I really want to reread The Nightingale because I wonder if her writing style was still the same like between the books, but I would still read Kristen Hanna books. They're so amazing. The stories themselves are always really beautiful and emotional. If I had to say absolutely read any of these books out of the 4, The Simple Wild, 100% you should read, and The Great Alone, I would say, is a pretty good book. Anyway guys, so that is all the Alaska-based books I've read. If you've read any different ones, I'd love to hear about them. If you have ever visited Alaska, I'd love to know where you've been and what you thought about it. That's gonna be it for today's video. You can always follow me on Instagram to see what I'm currently reading, or if there's any changes to my upload schedule. Please like and subscribe to this channel. I would love for you guys to stick around, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday.